So welcome everyone to this presentation meeting on how to apply for pilot projects under the HALRIC Cross Border program. So today we will have a look at the presentation about the Interreg project, HALRIC, and how to apply for pilot projects. Then there will be time for questions and an open discussion. And then depending on the participants' wishes, we can also try and have a brainstorming and matchmaking around various projects. So HALRIC is an Interreg cross-border project in the Öresund-Kattegat-Skagerrak region, plus the Hamburg region. And it combines different competences and resources to strengthen the competitiveness in this region. And the idea is to create a greater critical mass and to better and more efficiently use research infrastructures, resource competence, and create common solutions and challenge borders and administrative structures. And in short, we can say that it's a project around life science where we will use infrastructure in the various countries and also with the involvement of industry, hospitals, and academia. There are 21 partner organizations in HALRIC, ranging from academia, large-scale research infrastructures, hospitals, let's say platforms that gather industry, such as Medical Village, Life Science Nord, Medical Valley Alliance, and a set of universities. Here is an image showing how the HALRIC project is structured. There are 4 different work packages, and today we will take a look at selected parts from work package 2. So the cross-border innovation and research package, where we will present you who are the infrastructure ambassadors under HALRIC, and we'll take a look at the pilot projects, how you apply for them, and we'll also say a few words about the so-called Hanseatic Science Cloud. So there are today, of course, both large-scale and small-scale research infrastructures, and the idea of HALRIC is to try and connect these ones with each other while making sure that industry and hospital can take usage of those and realize the potential and connect everyone to world-class researchers and experts in these fields. And there are in this region today already a set of large-scale research infrastructures. There is the Petra-free storage ring at the DESY synchrotron in Hamburg, where there are a set of beamlines. And I can also mention that the EMBL, European Molecular Biology Center, they have 3 different beamlines that they operate at the DESY synchrotron. Then there is 3.4 kilometers from the DESY site in another town. There is the Schennefeld. In Schennefeld, there is the European EXFEL, which is a free electron laser facility that produces flashes of X-rays. And then in Aarhus in Denmark, there is also a smaller synchrotron. And then in Lund, we have the Max 4 synchrotron, where there are a set of beamlines. And I will also mention it later on. There's also the so-called Danmarks beamline, which is operated by a consortium of Danish partners. And then next to Max 4, just a few hundred meters more north, we have the European spallation source, which is a neutron facility. Yes, and then we have a set of cutting-edge complementary infrastructures in the region as well. I already said a few words about the EMBL in Hamburg, and apart from operating 3 beamlines, they also have labs for sample preparation and characterization with other techniques, and they also have computational facilities. Then if we take a jump to Lund in the so-called BMC building, Biomolecular Center, we have a set of instruments and platforms, national nodes in Sweden, where there are, let's say, machines such as cryo-EM, biological mass spectrometry, and also MR scanners, and also in vivo X-ray microtomography scanners. And there's also the option to do clinical genomic studies and proteomics and human antibody therapy. And then if we take a small, let's say 30-minute drive to Malmö, there is, as an example, the Biofilms Research Center for biointerfaces, and they can do research on life and material science. And they also have an open lab, which is open for other partners to use. And then as another example, in between Sweden and Denmark, there is, let's say, a virtual center for quantification of imaging data from MAX4 or any other type of modality that can produce images. And in Oslo, as an example, they are constructing a so-called life science building, which will host a set of equipment. And this one will also be inaugurated in 2026. So there's a lot of, let's say, life science research infrastructures, both cutting edge, smaller ones and larger ones in our region. When it comes to the cross-border innovation and research ambassadors, we are so far, we count 6 persons. So there's me from the Lund University side and MAX4. There's Lucy Holt from University of Copenhagen, Nikolina Sekulic from University of Oslo, Björn Dahlhus also from University of Oslo, Jacob Öster from Rigshospitalet in Denmark, and Josephine Ward from Aarhus University. And from the German side, University of Hamburg, they will still need to recruit an ambassador, so this will be communicated later. As an example of a technique that produces a lot of data and requires a lot of computational resources, I will give an example of tomography, which is also one of the techniques I used. So in the region of HALRIC, I have so far mapped that there are more than 25, let's say, micro to nano tomography lab scanners or beamlines. So starting at Oslo, they have 2 different lab scanners. And then in Sweden, at Lund University, we have at least 4 different scanners, 2 that are more commercial and 2 that are built in the lab. And then at MAX4, we have 3 different beamlines that can produce tomographic images. And one of them is also the Danmarks beamline, which is operated by a consortium of Danish partners, including universities and other interest partners. And then, of course, we have the European Spallation Source, which will, I would say, roughly in 2027 or so, 2028 perhaps, have the Odin beamline, which will have neutron tomography. But already today they have a so-called YMIR test beamline where they can test hardware and software for Odin. And then if we take a look in Denmark, there is the DTU Imaging Center at DTU, where they have at least 4 different scanners. I will add one, which is missing. And then we also have mediating companies such as DTI, which have a set of scanners, and Exnovotech, which is a company. They're not part of HALRIC, but I present them to show the potential in the region. And one can also consider collaborating with partners which are outside the HALRIC consortium, which we can speak about later. And then if we take a jump down to Hamburg, you can see that there are a set of beamlines at the DESY synchrotron, many of which are operated directly by DESY, but some are operated by other institutes, for example, PO5 beamline, and also parts of PO7 beamline is operated by the Helmholtz-Centrum Heron. And then the P10 beamline operated by Göttingen University. And there's also a company in Hamburg, Yxlon. And then I can also mention that there is, similar to as the Danmarks beamline, which is, let's say, constructed and operated by Danish partner, but on Swedish soil, there's also the so-called Swedish material science beamline at Petra Free DESY in Hamburg, which is, let's say, operated and hosted by 2 Swedish universities as host universities, KTH and Linköping University. So you can see that there are already cross-border interactions in the HALRIC region, which is very nice. And then once we have produced these data sets, which can be in the range of gigabytes to terabytes, even petabytes, you need to store the data somewhere, and you need to compute, and you need to get some type of results, some numbers that you can state. So you need computing clusters, and there is already a set of computing clusters in the HALRIC region, starting with Oslo University, where there are 2 computing centers. At Lund University in Max 4, there are at least 2 different clusters, officially 3 for the moment, I would say. One has been inaugurated and one is shutting down then following an upgrade. And then also the European Spallation Source, they actually have their computing cluster in Copenhagen, actually, while the facility stands in Sweden. The computing cluster is in Denmark. So the data is transferred after experiment. And then, as I mentioned, there's also the KIM collaboration between the Swedish side and the Danish side. And in Denmark, there are also a set of computing clusters ranging from University of Copenhagen to DTU to DTI and to the Alexandra Institute. And if we take a look in Hamburg, there are a set of different computing clusters, I would say mainly operated by DESA, European XFL and EMBL, that can provide access to the users that come to the facilities, but also for these other institutes and universities that are on the DESA site, let's say. And that brings us to the next topic, because as you can see, there are a set of different clusters in the region, and one collects data at the different sites where you have the research infrastructure, and each infrastructure might have their own cluster. But there is also, in a way, a drawback, because you need to ask for cluster access to all of these different clusters to work on your data. And that brings us to the next topic and work package in HALRIC, which is the Hanseatic Science Cloud. And here is the idea to try and unify and create a common interface where you can work on your data, but you just log in via one route, let's say, and you see one desktop, and it doesn't matter where your data was produced or stored, or which tools you need to process your data, but the idea is to have one common interface that can be shared between the partners. And that is Anders Sjöström, who's head of that work package. And one can also say that this work package, it will need to deal with a lot of, if we say, challenges and opportunities, because we are dealing with 4 different countries, and there are, of course, different regulation and policies on cross-border data sharing that will need to be addressed. And many of these, both the large research facilities and the smaller ones, the cutting-edge ones, they produce large amounts of data, which can be in the range of terabyte to petabyte after a few days of experiments. And then we're almost at the finish line. So now we will take a look at the pilot projects, the application, how to find a partner or an infrastructure, and what one should think about when you're prioritizing your application. So once you send in your application, the application will be evaluated based on 6 different criteria. So there will be cross-border collaboration. Do you have a partner in another country, which is a requirement? Do you have any industry or clinical research involved in the study? Is there innovation potential? Have you created a new project constellation, in the sense that are you collaborating? Is the idea to collaborate with a new partner that you have never collaborated with before, or are you collaborating with prior collaboration partners of yours? So finding a new product partner that you have never collaborated with before will strengthen the application when it's being evaluated. And then, of course, if the project is feasible, and are you using more than one infrastructure? One infrastructure is minimum. And as an example, I have constructed this little, how do you say, storytelling mode, where I will be the narrator. So imagine that you have 2 project partners, 1 and 2. They come from academia. They're in 2 different countries. They have found each other. Maybe they have collaborated before, or in some way they found each other. They already have in mind they want to use an infrastructure in another country. And if, for example, they will speak with us cross-border ambassadors, it could be that we have knowledge about another partner that comes from industry or hospital, and we can try and connect them with each other. Or in case, and this will of course then strengthen the application, or it could be that the beamline staff at the infrastructure one might have a person in mind. So maybe they can also recommend a person. So feel free to interact with us cross-border ambassadors or even speak with infrastructure. And then speaking with us, it could also be that we see potential in these two project partners using another infrastructure in another country, which would strengthen the application even further. And in another constellation, there could be a project partner from academia or hospital who has an idea, but she might not have a partner to collaborate with. Then we can suggest a potential match, let's say, and perhaps they will be really happy, and maybe they were not aware of each other, but they feel like it's a really good match, and they can create something new. Or it could be that this partner does some searches, him or herself, in publication records or databases, find a potential candidate, contact this person, the other person is interested, and then if or not, they could also speak with us ambassadors, and maybe we can suggest a new infrastructure that they can use. And of course, there would also be the option in the future to use the Hanseatic Science Cloud. And that could also be a thing to state in the application, but maybe not for the initial projects because it will need some time to set up. So going over to the call, I hope that all of you have found, let's say, the site halric.eu, and then you can click pilot projects. You can download the call text. But just to make a small summary, the idea is to create a project within the life science area and to use at least one research infrastructure in the HALRIC region, and typically to go for 6-month-long projects, but they can also be shorter or longer. And the next deadline is next week, 8th of June, and application will be reviewed and announced by the 20th of June, but also let you know that applications will be evaluated on a rolling basis till end of September 2025, so more than 2.5 years from now, roughly. So there are more chances if you feel that the deadline is too short this time. And the aim is, of course, to accelerate and use the use of strategic research infrastructure in the HALRIC region by involving industry, hospitals, and universities, and connect researchers and research infrastructures with each other. And financial support is awarded to HALRIC partner organizations, but if you have a partner outside the organization, they can, of course, join the project, but at their own expense. And employment costs are reimbursed with 40% in Sweden for the Swedish, Danish, and German partners, while in Norway it's reimbursed with 50% for Norwegian partners. And then here is a small example that imagine that you have a researcher or technician or PhD student working 100% in a pilot project. You can have or you need to have a supervisor and a co-supervisor, and they can work 20 or 30%. While as if you have a research from a hospital, usually they have clinical duties. So here it's accepted to work, of course, less than 100%. And you can also, in another situation, if you don't have, let's say, a researcher, technician, PhD student, you can also have 2 senior researchers working, for example, 20% in the project. But all of these numbers can be exchanged to any number, let's say between 1 to 100%, but it's only 40% of the employment cost that will be reimbursed. And if we take a look at the application, which can also be downloaded on the web page, I have made an example here where I inserted some pseudo-Latin text. And if we go through this one, we can summarize and see that at maximum, basically, one only needs to write 3 A4 pages, let's say, and the rest are just contact details, let's say. So just to put it out there that it's not a lot of text to write, but of course the most important thing is that what you put in the text is well thought through, and it's feasible, and all following all these criteria that I mentioned before. And then there is also on the web page, you can download a budget form. And this is in the EXL format, and all of the fields in yellow, they are the ones where you should fill in information. So the salary level of the persons working the project, and these points over here, these three ones, you can check with your financial officers at your department what the level is. And then everything here is calculated automatically based on the info you input in the yellow fields. And then we can see that this proposed project will cost in total 69,000 euros, and it will be reimbursed by 40%, which amounts to 28,000 euros. And you can also see that here there is 15% overhead accepted for the project, while as the 6% overhead for travels, that one will stay with the HALRIC organization and be used for various conferences, travel to various conferences, and so on for the project partners. As an example, with respect to how much funding was granted, this is just an example. The numbers can switch between the organizations, let's say, but the goal is to aim for roughly 75 different pilot projects during the next 3 years under the HALRIC project. And with that, as water is another common factor that connects us apart from research infrastructure and life science, I thank you for your attention in all the languages of the project partners, and I hand over the word back to Kajsa.
Thank you, Emanuel. Thank you for a great presentation, introduction to HALRIC.